just go with what we've got. Hi there, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could join me today for Ask a Parliamentarian. This is session number 7, and we're going to be talking about voting and in particular ballots and what kind of ballots, the difference between a spoiled ballot versus and I'm just drawing a blank now. Sorry about that. A spoiled ballot, abstaining from a ballot, that sort of thing. So thank you. Just to get started, welcome to this presentation. Let me see if I can get the screen to go over. There we go. And Jeffrey, where do I find my notes again?
Your notes. Shouldn't they be up over here?
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. And let me be able to go to the side. There we go. Okay. So welcome, you guys. Just a brief note about me. I'm a member of National Association of Parliamentarians. I will be taking my registered parliamentarian test at the end of this month, beginning of next month. Super excited about that. And my mission is helping people find their voices and get engaged in society using the tried and true principles of parliamentary procedure. So I am glad you could be here today because you are helping me fulfill my purpose, and hopefully we will get some of your questions answered. So let's move on to, okay. Hey, Jeffrey, I do have a question. If they're, can they see actually, let me ask you guys who are there on the screen. Do you see? Oh my goodness.
Let's see. What?
Hold on.
This.
Can they see that?
Oh, if you want to.
Thank you.
There you go.
Wendy, what is it you want us to see? I see you just fine. Beautiful flag behind you. That's what I can see. Is that what you're wondering?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Let
I
me
see
see
you.
if I can.
I see
Okay.
you.
I apologize, you guys. I have a slide that had a video attached to it.
That I do not see, and now I can't figure out how to shut my volume off, so bear with me. Because, you know, I'm so good at this too.
Okay.
Okay, go up.
Okay, so Jeffrey, we've got a problem.
Let's see. With that.
Because the video is going on that I had attached to the screen, but they can't see the screen, they can only see me. Okay, you guys, thank you. I apologize that it still is being really buggy. Okay.
Go with this specific one.
Okay, let's just skip to the next screen because the next screen.
This one?
Yes. Hopefully there's no video attached to it.
There you go.
Okay.
I made it in this specific tab that's being shared.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, my dear audience, do you guys see the screen with 2 Robert's Rules of Order books on it? The white version and the yellow version? Laura says yes with the thumbs up. Okay, fabulous. So that part is working. Okay, excellent. So I apologize that I took that last slide from a video that I was putting together, and obviously I had the video attached. So, okay, let's move. So just going back really quick, these are the 2 books that are Robert's Rules in Order today. And so when you see the RONR 12th edition or RONRIB 3rd edition, those are references to these 2 books that make up Robert's Rules of Order. These are the official books this is what I have been studying, what I'm comfortable about. This pretty much most of my training follows up on these. There's many other types of parliamentary procedure out there, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to focus on these rules. So going to move on. So I did want to point out a couple notices, or particularly one notice. Oh, thank you, Edward or Jeffrey. Okay, now Laura Mead probably should smile at this. I want you guys to know this is awesome. I love being a member of National Association of Parliamentarians because there's always opportunities to learn so much more. And as you know, parliamentary procedure is used in HOAs, it's used in boardrooms, it's used you know, in social clubs all across the United States and actually throughout the world. This particular training that will be coming up on April 20th, so within the week, will actually focus on democracy in action, which, you know, is how in the world do we have these civic skills that help us move forward and decide as a people how we're going to govern ourselves. And I'm really excited because Laura Mead is going to be one of the teachers at that. Laura is my mentor and our Region 5 chair in National Association of Parliamentarians. So I'm really looking forward to attending this conference and seeing her message. If you're interested in it, you can take a look at that screen clip, or I'm sorry, the QR code that's on there. That has a link that goes directly to the parliamentarians.org/event/NAP virtual spring conference. Anyway, you can see that on the screen. And if you lose that, you can give me a call and I can get you that link. It does cost money. Unfortunately, everything with training kind of tends to cost money, except for Ask a Parliamentarian, it's free. But it will be well worth it. And if you're especially if you're in an industry where you need CEU credits, it's very likely that you'll be able to get CEU credits for this, depending on your particular profession. So moving forward, let's see. And it's not letting me. There we go. Yes. Okay, time for our mini lesson. Actually, it's going to be a little bit of a bigger lesson, but then I still hope to have some time afterwards for question and answer. So this is the big question that a lot of people have been asking me. What's the difference between a spoiled ballot and abstaining, and why does it matter? Let me share in a nutshell. When you abstain, when you have an opportunity to vote, that is you as an entitled member of the organization expressing your will on a specific matter, whether it's a motion and you're voting yes or no, or whether it's an election and you're voting between different candidates. You as a member have the right to make your preference heard. And so there's many different ways to vote. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but you have the right to vote. You also have the right to abstain from voting. That is a fundamental right you have as a member of that organization. Now, when you vote, you can choose to vote you can actually just do a blank ballot. And blank is actually, especially if it's a ballot vote, and we'll be talking about that in a minute, but let's say everyone gets ballots and there's different options you can choose from. If you choose not to, if your choice is to abstain, you don't want anyone to know you're abstaining, don't mark anything on your ballot. That is the same as abstaining. In other words, your choice is to not make your preference known among any of those options. And so those are kind of two different things. When it comes to counting votes, blanks and abstentions are not counted in the total number of votes cast. However, if you put in somebody else, it is your right as a member of the organization to write in somebody on that ballot. Now, let's say that somebody is qualified. Let's say you're part of an HOA and anybody could be, as long as you're an HOA member in good standing, you've paid your dues, you're able to be on the board. And let's say, for some reason your name was not on the ballot. People could choose to write your name on the ballot depending on the rules, of course, in your specific HOA. But by and large, according to Roberts, if you're an eligible candidate, people can write your name on the ballot. As a member, you have the right to do that, even if the people who wrote the ballot left that name off. You are expressing a preference. Now, let's say you write in somebody who is not eligible. Like you say, I want Mickey Mouse for president. That person, obviously, Mickey Mouse is a fictional character and he is not older than 35 years old. Well, I guess technically he is, but is not technically a US citizen, is not allowed to vote, is not naturally born. For all those, multiple reasons, Mickey Mouse is not a valid candidate. And therefore, there wouldn't, when all the ballots are added up, and they add up all the different votes for candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, the ballots that wrote in or chose Mickey Mouse would not be counted towards the as a valid candidate. It would be a spoiled ballot, but it would still be counted in the number of votes cast. So we will get to that in just a little bit. We're going to back up. And we're going to kind of go layer upon layer upon layer. I hope that was a little segue into where we're going to go with this. Laura, just to give you a heads up, I don't know if you heard, and for those of you who did not attend the Republican Party convention here in North Dakota, there was a candidate who was not allowed per party rules to be a candidate at convention. There were many people in that convention, many delegates who felt that that was a very unfair rule. It was handled, it was very much pushed through. It was a rule. So this particular candidate was not allowed to be on the ballot. However, many people chose to put his name in, chose to spoil their ballot by writing his name in, indicating a preference for him. And it did have a major effect on the convention. It was kind of a cool situation. So, okay, let's move on.
Mickey Mouse is 98 years old, Mom.
Oh, I am informed by my son that Mickey Mouse is 98 years old, and therefore he is older than 35 years old, but okay.
November 18th, 1928.
Okay, thank you, my dear son. Okay, let's move on. Okay, here is a basic principle of parliamentary procedure. And this is found in Robert's Rules of Order 4531. The principle followed is that a choice has no mandate from the voting body unless approval is expressed by more than half of those entitled to vote and registering any evidence of having some preference. So kind of looking at that, there's this idea of, you've got this idea of more than half of those entitled to vote. So you see our little teeter-totter? It's against a major principle of Robert's Rules to have a minority make a binding decision for everyone else. So in Robert's Rules, the majority rules. The majority generally sets the path forward. But if you take a look, again, those entitled to vote, and then finally, this last part, registering any evidence of having some preference. And so that'll play into line in a little bit. Let me see, there is a team chat here and I don't have chat opened up. Hey, Jeffrey, I'm going to need your help probably, and I'll pay you more for this. I need to have the chat box opened up. Okay. So if you do have specific questions that you don't want to hold off to later or clarifications, do write that in the team chat.
Do you need me just to look at the team chat so I can?
I'd like the team chat to be up so that I can keep track of that while I'm speaking.
Right.
Okay. And there is one thing under the team chat. Okay. And then you see team chat right there. Oh.
There you
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Okay,
Is it all working?
it's all working. Now we're good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
You're done.
Okay, just do those. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so majority means more than half. I want you to get that in your head really, really well. A majority is more than half. So if we had 100 members attending, a majority is 51 members because
50 members with the vice president counting as a 50.
so because of course 50% is 50, more than half is 51. So let's move on to the next slide. There we go. Okay, now this is something I wanted to point out to you guys, is that I used to think that a majority meant 50% plus one. Now, if you see over on the right-hand side, I've got that little yellow symbol with more than 50%. I hope that'll be a visual reminder to you guys. The problem with 50% plus one is because it doesn't always work. If you see down there that example, it works if you've got an even number. But if you don't have an even number, if you have an odd number, if there's, say, 103 members attending, 50% of 103 is 51.5. If we add one more, then that's 52.5. Some people might be confused and think, oh, so it's really 53, and that's incorrect. Always remember that a majority is more than half. In this case, 50% is 51.5, so more than half is 52. So that actually is really helpful when you're in elections where especially you're trying to figure out 2/3 or that sort of thing. Oh, I'm sorry. 2/3 is at least 2/3. Laura's looking at me probably going, okay, let's move on. Okay, before we go over, so if you see over in the right-hand side of the slide, more than 50%, of course, that's our majority. There's also some cases where, for example, limiting debate or maybe changing a bylaw, you need to do a 2/3 vote. I'm not going to go over that much anymore. These are the different voting methods. Before we get into some of the ballot stuff, these are the different voting methods we tend to see in Robert's Rules. Voice vote, of course, is all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say no, and then the chair makes a decision on whether or not the ayes have it or the noes have it, and then announces the result. Then we have what's called a standing vote, and a chair can choose at any time to say, hey, can choose to skip a voice vote and just go straight to a standing vote, straight to some of these other votes. That's the chair's decision. Or as a member, you can choose to ask that one of these be done. But a standing vote, of course, is all those in favor, please stand. And then please be seated. All those opposed, please stand, be seated. And then again, the chair makes a decision. The ayes have it, the noes have it, etc. Let's say that the chair is still in doubt. Oh, instead of standing, you could also do a show of hands. And this is more common if you're at a committee, like a smaller committee or a smaller board, smaller group of people, you can just raise your hands because that way you're not standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down. Let's say though, for example, that you have to have a 2/3 vote, or you've got a lot of people and the chair is in doubt. Or maybe say the chair says, oh, the ayes have it. And somebody says, I don't think so, division. And so you can have a counted vote. And that's where all those in favor, please rise or hold up your credentials or whatever. And then those are counted actually, where before a standing vote is just kind of based on whatever the chair sees. Counted vote is more specific. A roll call vote is something that you usually see in say in committees or for legislators, where each person is called and given the chance to vote, and those are recorded. Usually you don't see those in large groups. But of course, the favorite one we've been talking about is the ballot vote or secret ballot. And that is where it could be used for elections, of course. It can also be used for any type of motion where there is very obviously some debate or some division. Oh, I learned this during convention. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact the exact Robert's Rules of Order reference in here. But there was a question, we were wondering, there was a motion on the floor. And because some of the districts handle their votes the way they do, there was a concern, are people standing up or sitting down? Is their preference being prejudiced because they're worried about what their neighbors are thinking, or maybe what their district chair is thinking or would be thinking of them? Would there be any type of repercussions for somebody who voted wrong in the sight of the other people in the group? In that case, any member, if you feel like when you're in an assembly, if you feel like that sort of situation is going on, that a secret ballot vote would yield a better vote, like a truer vote, you do have the ability to stand up and make a motion to that effect. And so, of course, you'd have to convince at least 50% of people to go with you, but you are able to make that request. So just throwing that one out there. Okay. So, finally, and you see on the side, little unanimous consent. That's another style of voting. Usually you hear it if the chair says, seeing no objections, we'll consider this passed. Or, there's a motion on the floor. Any discussion? No discussion? Okay, without objection, we'll consider it passed. And without objection, so that is unanimous consent. That helps things go a lot faster, but obviously if you're against that, you need to stand up right after he says no objection. You say, I object. Anyway, okay, let's go ahead and move on. Any particular questions at this point? Okay, hopefully clear as mud. Okay, so I wanted to point out again, you guys saw, of course, a majority is more than half of the members attending, but there's a slight difference here. When there's a majority vote, in Robert's Rules of Order, it says more than half of the votes cast by persons entitled to vote, excluding blanks or abstentions. And so the big difference when it comes to voting versus just the number of people attending a meeting, not everybody is going to cast a vote. You're going to have some people that maybe are out in the hallway. Maybe some people have left home for the day. Maybe they're hunting around like crazy looking for their ballot book because someone stole it. True story. Not everybody is going to vote. And so to base, the result of your vote on how many people are in the room, that is not Robert's Rules. That is not a true majority vote. A majority vote is more than half of the votes cast. So of the people who are eligible to vote and who have cast a vote and expressed a preference, those are the numbers that are counted. And so, of course, you see in here excluding blanks, as we mentioned before, or abstentions. A blank is essentially a silent abstention. So those people who choose to abstain, their votes are not counted. But of all the votes that are cast, that is what comes up with the majority. Let me see, I'm not sure if I have, okay, then I brought it back to our next screen is this final point about those entitled to vote and registering any evidence of having some preference. So I wish I could have done a couple more slides to show more visually what happened at convention. But essentially it was this. We had a two-way race, two candidates, and we had people voting, but there was a choice among a minority that was upset that their candidate was not allowed to participate. And so that minority, after discussion and getting together, not all the minority, but there was enough of a minority, said, you know what? We're not going to vote for candidate A, and we're not going to vote for candidate B. We're going to write in our candidate, candidate C. And we know that he will be counted illegal. But it still will be counted in the number of votes cast, the total number of votes cast. So we had all these people vote in, and sure enough, kind of a almost even three-way split, but the number required to get a majority was up here. And because there were 3 candidates, none of those 3 candidates got a majority. And Laura's shaking her head yes. And then, so sure enough, the chair announced the results after everything was counted. And so a second ballot was taken. And some people were like, oh, why do we have to do a second ballot? From experience, multiple ballots are very common in a convention. And my personal preference or my personal opinion is I like that. I think that is one of the wonders of a convention system, different than say, for example, a primary vote or a one-time vote. This is one reason why I personally don't like preferential voting when it comes to some of these weightier decisions. Because with preferential voting, and I'll do a different lesson on that sometime, but in preferential voting, you just put all of your choices all at once and there's one ballot. Much easier to count, much more efficient, kind of cool to see how it works out. But it lacks the deliberation that can happen in a convention. It lacks the decision-making that can happen when people come together and say, oh, this many people voted for candidate A, this many for B, this many for C, this many for D. You know what? I really wanted A and A didn't do so well, but actually I could get behind candidate D. And some of that, just that connecting, that talking, that discussing with your neighbors, allowing the candidates to have additional speaking time. Maybe on a second or third ballot, one candidate will say, you know what? I appreciate your support. I'm going to withdraw from the race and I encourage you to vote for candidate B. And the delegates can choose to follow that if they wish. Or maybe they choose to vote for somebody else. But these are the sorts of things that can happen at a convention. I love it. There are some people that think, ooh, have these images of smoke-filled rooms, cigars, and the big bosses making their choices. But when you've got a room full of 1,600 delegates representing members of the organization from all across the state or all across the region or the area, to me, that is a fabulous example of democracy in action. That is the magic of us being able to govern ourselves. Okay, done with soapbox. So let's say so this is what happened at convention. We had, a third of the delegates decided to spoil their ballot. And it was very clear because of the way that the different district chairs reported, it was very clear who these spoiled ballots were for. Well, a second ballot was taken. And this time, the minority had sent word among themselves saying, hey, if you want to spoil your ballot and write in this candidate again, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. In fact, that candidate was a delegate and stood up and said, hey, I didn't tell my people this. They felt disenfranchised, so they're sending their preference. You guys, you vote your conscience type sort of thing. So sure enough, second ballot was counted. This time, there weren't that many spoiled ballots. There were very few spoiled ballots. There were some abstentions, but what was interesting is that there was a smaller number of votes cast officially, and it was still kind of a three-way split. Unfortunately, well, the two main candidates, the top one, I think, fell 5 or 6 votes short of getting a majority. And so for those of you who are at the convention, you know what happened. Basically, one of the candidates stood up and decided to withdraw. And so that the only official candidate that was in the race that received the nomination was the other candidate, not the minority candidate, not the one who withdrew, but the other one who was standing, the one who did get most votes, just not a majority. So that's exactly what happened. And some people think, oh, you were playing dirty pool. But it really came down to how many votes included in a majority. And when you're talking this democratic process, you really do take a look at how many votes are needed to get that more than half. Okay, any questions up to this point? Bueller. No, anyone? Okay. You know what? Let's take a, I don't see any questions coming in. Feel free to jump in at any time. No mentioned yet. Okay. I am going to go on, let's see. That was the slide that I wasn't able to do. Go one more. Aha, extra bonus. So here's a couple extra slides that I picked up from a previous session that I wanted to share with you guys, if it will let me. Okay. And it's not letting me go. Okay, let's try this one more time. There we go. Okay. Oh. Okay. Let's do this for a second. Let's see. I don't know if how many I had on this one. Okay, let's do just kind of a fun exercise here. Let's say, so we're going to walk through one thing I didn't cover earlier, but for those of you who may be new to parliamentary procedure, there is a term called quorum. And a quorum is what's important or necessary for business to happen. When you've got a deliberative body, again, going back to that principle of it's the majority that makes the decision, and that the body or the assembly should not be held to the choices of a minority. So one important principle is a quorum. How many people are required to be at the meeting before the decisions there made there are valid, are binding upon the whole group. And so a lot of bylaws will say, okay, we're going to say that 50 members have to be involved or be present to make a quorum, or maybe they'll say 10% of the total membership, or, you know, different organizations will have different rules. However, if there are no rules in your bylaws for your district or for your club or for your association, Robert's rules, the default of Robert's rules is a majority of the membership. And so when you're talking about how many people that are there in the room or how many people that could be there, a majority is, of course, more than half. So, so here on the screen, you see majority, more than half. So let's say there's 100 delegates attending the convention. So there's a business meeting, and let's say that, oh, do I have this here? Let's say there's 86 members attending. I'm going to check to see. Oh, I don't have that here. Okay. Oh. So let's say that there's 100 delegates attending is at the convention. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. Okay, there's one really cool thing. If it's a convention, there's a slight difference. A convention, they base quorum on how many people have registered as attended. So not necessarily how many are in the room at the time.
So Wendy, if it's like a group or a club and they don't have bylaws saying what a quorum is, they are not helping themselves by talking people into being part of their group who never ever show up then, because then they'll never wind up with a quorum and they essentially are tying their own hands, correct?
Absolutely. You got it, Mary. Exactly. It is really important to have it written into your bylaws. If you have typically, say, 30 people attend, maybe you've got 100 people on the books, but typically you have about 30 people attend a meeting, I would say maybe put into your bylaws that 20 or 25 make a quorum. So that, you know, and depending how many I think at one time, and Laura, you could probably correct me, at one time there were more specific guidelines in Robert's rules, but they changed it to where now it's just, there's the majority, but it's important to have it in your bylaws, because for some groups, say you're a district committee and you've got a ton of people that represent lots of different sections, you need to have a little bit higher of a bar so that the majority aren't held or beholden to the decisions of a minority. So did you want to say something, Laura?
Sure, yeah. If you don't have it in your bylaws, you might also want to check your state law, because sometimes they will have, if your organization is incorporated like a nonprofit organization or something, they might have a requirement that it's like 10% of your membership or something like that. So if you don't have it in your bylaws, which is much better place to put it, just so you know what your number is. But the state law might give you a little more guidance than going half, depending on the organization, if it's like a corporation of some sort. But state law does have some information about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually, Laura, you brought up something that it dawned on me I meant to include in this presentation, and it blew my mind. But keep in mind that when we're talking voting and, illegal ballots or spoiled ballots versus blank ballots and all that sort of thing, this is Robert's rules. This is for private organizations. If it's like voting for your county or a primary election or things like that, state law, city law, county law, whatever, should have those written down already, that what constitutes a spoiled ballot, what constitutes an abstention, or all that sort of thing. And of course it changes. If you're on a city council, what is the effect of an abstention? What is the effect of somebody putting in a blank vote, a blank ballot, if it's secret ballot, that sort of thing. So just keep in mind that the two circumstances are a little bit different, especially if you're looking at a legislature. Usually legislators go by a totally different set of rules called Mason's rules. A lot of them do. Not necessarily Robert's rules. So gotta love it. All sorts of fun stuff. So Mary, did that help answer your question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I belong to a couple different groups, that they're always thinking they need to make it look like they have a lot of people, but I think they may be shooting themselves in the foot.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's just that sometimes we get stuck on having numbers when sometimes you need to start your core and get your rules and stuff going first.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't thinking wrong, so thank you.
You got it. You betcha. And really, you look at it, any of our organizations that we belong to, usually you belong to an organization that you care about, that is doing something that you believe in, and you want your organization to succeed. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow your ranks and increase, encourage more people to come. But again, if it's just to stuff the rules, just to have, the numbers on paper, but realistically nobody's coming, that is a disservice. And your organization's not doing. Yeah,
it's also a pet peeve of mine. Yeah, you're either part of it or you're not. No, just kidding. Thank you.
Well, you betcha. And at different times and seasons, I've been part of some groups that I really felt really good about, and maybe the most that I could do was show up every quarter, and wasn't able to be as much of a participator as I wanted to. But again, we just try to do the best that we can and follow the rules that we can. So awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on from this screen, this slide screen, and go to the next one because I really like this. If it will let me move. There we go. Okay. This comes from Robert's Rules of Order 5818, going over duties of delegates. And this just reinforces this idea down at the very, very bottom. It says a delegate is free to vote as he sees fit on questions at the convention, except as his constituent unit may have instructed him in regard to particular matters scheduled for consideration. So, okay, taking that first part, as a delegate, as a member, you have the authority, you have the right to vote the way that you see fit. Now, when you are elected as a delegate to a convention and you are representing a constituent unit or a subunit of that organization, you are bound somewhat. You are bound if your group said, we want you to vote a certain way, then you're accountable to your group to vote that certain way. I mean, if it's a secret ballot, who's going to know, right? But the whole thing with being a delegate is that expectation that you're going to return and report. And when you return and report, the people who elected you have the right to say, now, did you vote for so-and-so? And you get to look them in the eye and tell them that you did or you didn't. So now, why is this a big deal? Because there's a big to-do, and especially here in North Dakota, when it comes time for delegates going to the national convention, there is a big question about can delegates vote their conscience on all the ballots at convention? When national delegates who are voted here go to the National Republican Convention, by state law and by party rule, I take that back. I'm not sure if it's state law or not. I apologize, but I do know that it's by party rule that national delegates are bound to vote for the presidential candidate that won the state on the first ballot. So there was an individual, I'm positive he was well-meaning, but at one time made a big stink. I think this was back in 2016, stating that delegates should be able to vote their conscience and don't have to vote for the presidential candidate that the state said, on the first vote. And that's per Robert's rules. That is wrong. So here's one interesting example. Our district chair, Travis, there was an issue that came up about electronic voting, and the group that was responsible for making the rules for convention were trying to decide whether or not they were going to support electronic voting. And there was a big, huge push for it. And yet in many of the grassroots districts, we were like, absolutely no. So Travis, who was our district chair, our district representative on the state committee, he came, we had a district executive meeting and we discussed this. And, I was like, hey, I don't want to see that happening. I don't think we should have electronic voting at this convention because we're all about trying to have voter integrity and election integrity. And how do we know if this program that these people are bringing in, it hasn't been tested for us yet? And do we trust so many important votes for this? I like what Travis said. Then he turned it around and he asked all of us executive committee people, he said, do you want to make a motion to bind me to go to the state committee meeting and vote that way? He was like, sure. I made that motion. Okay, Travis, when you go to the state committee meeting, you tell them that you're voting to represent your district and your district does not want electronic voting. And sure enough, that's what he was able to do. He was actually a leader in the state committee to stand up and say, we do not want to pay for $80,000 for electronic voting when we've been doing this for years and it works just fine. So, and I agree if some people maybe disagree with that opinion, but that was an example of a constituent unit, in this case, our district executive committee, binding our representative to vote a certain way when he got to the higher group. So anyway, just kind of an interesting. Any thoughts or comments about that at all? Okay. You know what? It just dawned on me. We are about out of time. And I didn't even give you guys time to, well, you had a chance to ask a few questions. Is there anybody who has any additional questions that you want to ask, or maybe something that you want me to cover in a future episode? I'm not seeing any hands raised. Right offhand. Okay. Let me go on to my final, if it will let me again. Go on to my final slide. Moving on from that. What are your questions? And then just a final thank you, you guys, because again, and I appreciate your patience with me, still trying to work out all this technology thing. It's getting better, degrees at a time. But again, you're helping me to learn parliamentary procedure even more. I'm helping you, I hope, to learn a little bit more about Robert's rules, and you're helping me to fulfill my calling in helping people to find their voice using parliamentary procedure. So feel free, if you've got any questions, if there's something that you want to see in a future episode, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call. I'm super grateful for you guys being involved and wanting to learn more. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks again for showing up, and have a good night.